Barbara has done this for years, and it's really special. And she has lots of people helping her to get to this point, but it's a big job, and it's something that will live on in our archives and our website. Remembering those who have been here before us is, I think we do an outstanding job doing that, and I think it's so important. So get my technology to work.
I'll unmute myself.
There it is.
Okay, we have.
Would you like me to mute myself?
Now it would be too late to get there. Mute. Why can't I hear the audio?
We can't hear anything. We can't hear anything.
Why is Mike Ballman me on here?
We're going to be doing today this quote: "Wilderness to the people of America is a spiritual necessity, an antidote to the high pressure of modern life, a means of regaining serenity and equilibrium." Next slide. Sigurd Olson also said, "I named this place Listening Point because only when one comes to listen, only when one is aware and still, can things be seen and heard." Now you can see a couple of loons in the background above the tree reflection in the water. This is also taken off of our dock. And I just want to tell a story that I think helps set the context to what we're doing today. My mom and dad built a cabin on Hungry Jack Lake in 1957, the year I was born, fourth out of 5 children. So you could say it was a bountiful year. And I spent all of my years growing up, summers on Hungry Jack Lake, all through the 60s. My dad passed away in 1986. He got to live to the ripe age of 64, way too young. Shortly after that, I noticed a loon hanging out in front of our cabin. And I started talking to it. That loon was holding the spirit of my dad. It would return every year. And I didn't know the mating schedule of loons or where they were nesting, but that loon was always in our bay in front of our cabin. My siblings even decided that's exactly what that is. So then John and I built our cabin in 2004, fast forward, and we're in our new house the first day, and I said, we need to find a way to bless this space. And I looked out, and right off this area, there was a loon. And it dried its wings. It looked at the cabin and it dried its wings. And then I swear to God, it floated to one end of our property, turned around, floated over whatever loons do, swim, or over to the other end of our property, came back to the middle, facing our cabin, and dried its wings again. I said, there's my dad, blessing our place. You couldn't deny it. And every spring when the ice goes out, there would be a loon in front of our cabin. Right, John? Yeah, you couldn't deny it. My mom passed away 5 years ago. She got to live to the ripe old age of 91. And I swear to God, that spring when the ice went out, there were 2 loons together. And you can't deny it. So a lot of times, how do you describe this place? Heaven on earth. John has even said heaven might be a letdown. But that story tells me the transparency of these woods. And indeed, it is heaven on earth. And so again, Sigurd Olson, only when one is aware and still can things be seen and heard. And now we begin. Stan Poole. He passed away in 2021. Stan, I read, was the most devout born-again Christian. He traded his suit and tie for jeans and flannels and moved to Grand Marais. He was the owner-operator of the Gunflint Motel in Grand Marais. And before I go on, I want to elicit a little more of what Dave was saying, that as we show the slides, and you know this person, and you have a bullet point story to tell, please come up behind me so you can get in the camera and tell that story, so that we can introduce ourselves to these folks and get to know them more. Remembering Stan Poole.
Jeez.
Ann Leeds, Brown Lake, Tuscarora Lodge. A most determined woman. These are the words from her son, Carrie. She talked her husband and two of her sons into a 12-day boundary water canoe trip in 1969. And with her gusto, they owned and operated Tuscarora Lodge from 1974 to 2004. The first 4 years by herself with her two kids. And her son, Carrie, some of you may know, then went on to operate the lodge after they had retired. Remembering Ann Leeds. Carl Ramey, if I'm saying his name right. Carl was happiest when he could spend time on the Gunflint Trail near the boundary waters. Carl served 4 years in the Air Force during the Vietnam War. He loved to sketch, paint with watercolor, and he loved music and played the guitar. Remembering Carl Ramey. Jerry Elbers, most sarcastic, dry sense of humor. Jerry and Joan were longtime cabin owners on Gunflint Lake. I wanted to get the word like most or longest or something because he got to live to be 96 years old. Remembering Jerry Elbers. Carol Germain. Biggest heart, most loving spirit is her legacy. Faithful pastor's wife to Don, and she and Don managed Saganaga Outfitters for 15 years. I know a lot of you
Saganaga.
knew Carol. Yeah. Remembering Carol Germain. Arlene Fladmark. She was the best player of canasta and famous for her scotcheroos. Doesn't she look like that? Her greatest joy was time with the family at the cabin on the Gunflint Trail. Remembering Arlene Fladmark. Carol Lyon. Her greatest passion was blueberry picking. If it was ripe, she picked it and made jams, jellies, and pies from her bounty. She was the ultimate host and caretaker to family and friends. As a young person, she worked at the end of the trail. And I might add, she is a best friend of Cheryl Daly's. Her family spent every summer at the cabin. Carol Lyon. Sharon Capel. My notes are directly from her husband, Jerry. A teacher extraordinaire, awarded national recognition for her work with Navajo and Hopi students. And at the community college level, one of her first organic chemistry students finished tops in the pharmacy program, and she was given an award through the University of Kansas. Most important, he said she was an excellent person. And still even more notable, she found the lot they own on Gunflint Lake. And in between all of that, he said, she raised 3 great daughters. Remembering Sharon Capel. Ken Lind. These words come from his best friend, Fred Smith. Ken was the best of friends with many Gunflinters. He was captured by the magic of the Gunflint Trail in 1947, after high school graduation from Cedar Falls, Iowa. After service in the Marine Corps for the Korean War, Ken returned to the Gunflint Trail and he bought his property in the early to mid 60s. Ken and his wife were very generous supporters of the Gunflint Trail Historical Society. Anything to add, Fred? I'm sure you do. Remembering Ken Lynn. Kia, and who knows how to say her name, her last name correctly? I know her as Kia. Most witty, outgoing young woman, sweetest, most lovely spirit, perky, delightful woman.
Interesting.
Kia grew up on the Gunflint Trail.
Oh, yeah.
She worked at Trail Center. I would dare to say she was one of the most favorite table attendants there.
Well, what happened was, you know, that area that you looked at yesterday, about you were curious whether it was going to cross that area. It was following the wire, the perimeter wire to the base, and then it hit that area and it stopped.
Jack Demser,
And turned
the most
around,
avid
and
fisherman,
kind of wandered off.
always
The
trying
rest
to
of the
outfish
band were
everyone else. From that
So I
picture, it
had to
looks like
carry
he's
it up
he
to the
accomplished
charger.
something. He was a very creative builder of
Yeah.
birdhouses.
I'm watching a
And the
program up
funniest
at the
story
Gunflint
was
Trail,
told
the
of
History
him being a
Society.
fisherman. The sun
Anyhow,
taking pictures of this moose.
so I put it back on the
Over half an
charger,
hour of filming as they
and
approached this
it's all
moose,
charged up
only to
now.
find out
And I
later
tried to get it going,
he
but I
had no
couldn't.
film in the camera.
It's flashing green.
Remembering Jack
And
Demser.
I've hit the stop and I've hit the start and all that, but nothing has happened. But I'm wondering if it hasn't been put to bed because of the weather.
Jim Sherman.
So I think
Jim
we
was
just need
always
to
trying to
sit
make you
tight here
smile and laugh, whether he knew
and
you or
see what happens.
he was a very accomplished writer and publisher.
So,
I might add that he was in Ken Burns.
oh yeah, it's looking really
too.
pretty.
They focused
Yeah,
on
it's
Laverne,
all coming
Minnesota.
together very
That was
nicely.
Jim's hometown.
So,
He was a terrible
yeah, it
geek
went all
and a
night, as I
lover of
say.
practical jokes. To his brother
And,
Roger,
so-
he gave a pillow that says, "I
Anyhow.
smile because you are my brother. I laugh because there is."
Okay, well, I kind of want to hear this. This is,
I was
we're
told
going to
that
have a
was Jim
thing
in a
about my
nutshell.
brother on here shortly.
Remembering Jim. Sherman.
This is a remembrance thing, and Carol's watching it too, so I should go and listen to this.
Dave Craig.
So let me catch you later. If I
Dave
can't
had
get
the
the
most
thing
loving
going, I'll
and gentle
consult
heart.
with you, okay?
The greatest humor,
Okay,
but most
Bye-bye.
of all, he was known for being a good listener and a good talker. He was the biggest fan of crossword puzzles, Culver's malts, chopping wood, true crime garage podcast, and Jack Reacher novels. Dave and his wife Barbara moved to the Gunflint Trail in 2020. It was his dream come true. He had a lifetime of memories with family in the BWC area. Again, taken to others. Remember Dave Craigness. Roger Thompson. Roger made the most of his life with total loss of hearing. He built his own log cabin, and he especially loved being up here in the wintertime. He knew the real reason we lived there. And he was happiest when reading, canoeing, fishing, cross-country skiing, feeding and identifying birds, and I might add, while traveling with the Kerfoots.
Well, I have a story or two. Roger and his wife Donna, they both were handicapped in the sense that they neither spoke or could hear. But one of our conversations that we had of a casual nature, Sue and I were commenting to them that we were about to plan a trip abroad, and this one was going to be to Africa. And their eyes just lit up. And one thing led to another with our little notebooks between each other. And the two of them joined us for a 3-week trip in the Serengeti of East Africa. And it was hard to fully appreciate the smiles and joy that they received when they could sit there in our Land Rover and see herds of elephants right at the door, so to speak, right next to us. And even then, it was hard for them because they couldn't express themselves in the sense that they couldn't laugh, they couldn't holler, they couldn't express their joy. But in spite of it, you could see it was right to their heart. The second trip they did with us, since they managed to do the first one all right, they gulped a little bit when I announced my next trip was going to be to the Himalayas. Well, they joined us for a very adventurous trip to the very remote kingdom of Bhutan, which has been a closed country for years. They, even to this day, only allow 400 people a week into their country, whether it's a tradesman, a relative, or a tourist. 400 a full week for the whole country. Anyway, they flew in with us. In fact, you see, access to Bhutan has one real difficult multi-day road, or they have one little strip about the size of our airport in Grand Marais, and the country owns two planes. And that's all that's allowed to fly in. They will not allow another international or carrier to bring anybody aboard. So we flew in their little 30-passenger plane and landed. And we spent 2 weeks in Bhutan with them, a week just adventuring in with their festivals and walking around singing the songs. And then a week up in the foothills of the Annapurnas, hiking up to, in this case in Bhutan, 14,000 feet. Well, there were two stories that go with this one. One of which is that when a person neither speaks nor can hear, there are other handicaps that kind of accompany it. One is a loss of balance. And we were hiking these trails up in the Himalayas with pretty near 1,000-foot drops on one side of us. And Donna, his wife, was struggling a great deal because she literally could not stand upright and be sure of herself. So for the entire time, first Roger snitched my walking sticks, and that was fine. That took care of him. And then with Donna, I assigned one of our staff people. He had to take his middle finger and hook it under her belt loop and hold her upright for the entire week as we trekked across the Himalayas. And then the second one, we were camped one night up at 14,000, and a herd of yak came in with their herdsmen, and they overnighted in the same pasture that we had pitched our tents. The herd of yak had one great big ugly bull that sat there and laid by himself and oversaw the rest of the herd. Roger took one look at him and decided he was going to go up and befriend him. Well, this ugly head yak bull did not like people, and no one had ever been able to get up close to him without being gorged or killed. The owner of the yak herd tried to discourage Roger from going up, as I did too. And Roger would have no part to that because he was a farmer from southern Minnesota and very much in tune with domesticated animals and the croplands of farming and everything. Anyway, he slowly walked up toward that bull, looking at him eyeball to eyeball. And the bull just sat there looking like, what in the heck is going on here? And Roger was the first person that had ever walked up to this great big bull with 4 to 5 foot horns and sit there and pet him. And then he turned around with a big smile on his face and walked back. And the bull just sat there and just looked at him. So we had some real fond memories of taking the two of them. And those were the 2 international trips that they took because they at least were with friends that could take care of it. And one of the requirements I made of all the people that were with us, because we had our own little group of usually about 10 people, everyone had to carry a little notepad and a pencil in their pocket because none of them learned sign language that fast. So we had to be able to communicate because they were the life of our party. And we saw to it that they were a part of everything. But Roger was a prince, and we really enjoyed having him with us on our trips.
Thanks, Bruce. Remembering Roger Thompson. Charlie Sugnet. Charlie was most well known for his work as a University of Minnesota English professor of 45 years. He was a great outdoors lover of canoeing, skiing, hiking, fishing. Charlie was a great intellect, conversationalist, generous friend. Remembering Charlie Sudnett. Bill Fink. I don't know if I can say he was the youngest person to ever make a trip up to the family cabin, because I might have been the youngest, given the cabin was built the year I was born. But Bill was only 5 months old on his first trip to the Fink family cabin in 1949. His brother Rich tells me that he was the most traveled family member to the BWCA in Quetico, covering the majority of both by the time he was a middle-aged adult. And just 2 weeks before his departure on his last solo trip in 2012, he suffered an aortic dissection that prevented him from going on that trip. That's how much he loved the Boundary Waters. Remembering Bill Fink. Kenny Skoog. Kenny was the most experienced guide, fisherman, and hunter. Though trapper, he readily admitted he was not. You can read about Kenny's story in the book A Life in Two Worlds that Betty Powell Skoog, his wife, and Justine Kerfoot wrote. He was married to Betty Powell. And you can see a lot of his story still being at the exhibit. He was part of the Powell family. And that's part of the temporary exhibit yet this year at the museum. Kenny was born and raised in Cook County, grew up here, worked and raised his family in Cook County. Kenny Skoog, remembering Kenny Skoog. Bob Monahan. He was so passionate about his life on SAG that he refused to leave during the Ham Lake fire. And he was known for making the best handmade lures and down weights. He had the greatest love for small creatures and had many chipmunk and squirrel friends that ate right out of his hand. And Bob was the one that always made sure the road was plowed, even when he had to walk behind with his snowblower to clear the sides of the road. And that was the picture from his obituary. I can only imagine he's a great character. Remembering Bob Monahan. And now at this last slide, well, I'll read it. I felt like lying down by the side of the trail and remembering it all. The woods do that to you. They always look familiar, long lost, like the face of a long dead relative, like an old dream, like a piece of forgotten song drifting across the water. Most of all, like golden eternities of past childhood or past manhood, and all the living and the dying and the heartbreak that went on 1,000,000 years ago. And the clouds, as they pass overhead, seem to testify by their own lonesome familiarity to this feeling. It's a quote by Jack Kerouac out of his book, The Dharma Bones. What I'd like you to do right now is just everybody close their eyes for a minute. With all the names that we've introduced ourselves to and remembered this afternoon, just touch base with your own self and the people that you are remembering that maybe passed long ago, or maybe passed within this last year. The people that you know because of their tie to the Gunflint room. And in a cacophony of remembering, just invite you to say their first name right now, everybody, all at the same time, out loud. Mom, Dad, Bob. And all those that are still resonating in our hearts. Keep them down. And we ask for God's blessing upon all of us. Amen. In concluding, just want to say, as that quote spelled out, the forest honors the trees that die through their natural act of regrowth. We honor the passing of your loved ones by doing the same. Each year, Kathy Landy plants a tree in memory of those who have passed. You will not find a label with your loved one's name on it, but if you see a new planting, know that the forest remembers and has embraced this new life, just as we remember and embrace this new life with our loved ones always nearby.
Anybody want to? Thank you. Bill and Bruce, I think there was something you want to do.
Anybody, Fred might have a story to tell. Raise your hand.
I've got a little story about Bob Monahan,
Yeah.
a little lighter story. Because Barb mentioned Bob was not going to leave during the fire. He wanted to stay and protect his property. So the fire department left him a fireproof jacket and a helmet, and Bob was a good beer drinker. He and Gordy Pearl shared quite a beer over the years. So Bob had another beer, went in to take a little nap, and laid down on his couch and fell asleep. And he woke up to the sound of his neighbor's propane tank exploding. And in his words, the fire was there, right at his doorstep. He had a sprinkler system that was working. But Bob went out in his fireproof jacket and helmet with his garden hose and managed to sprinkle the last little remains of the fire that were creeping up to his cabin. So he basically fought the fire hand-to-hand combat, more or less, to save his place. But Bob was quite a character. And he had the unique distinction of being the most northerly year-round resident on the Gunflint Trail, excluding Canadian residents.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Anybody else in Zoom land? Bruce and Bill?
Fred is saying no.
Okay.